The winter of 1878 brought more than just the biting cold to Gunnison, Colorado. It brought Zara Sullivan stumbling through the snow with nothing but the clothes on her back, a small leather pouch of coins sewn into her skirt, and a reputation that followed her like a shadow. The mining town, nestled in the valley with mountains standing sentinel on all sides, had seen its fair share of desperate souls, but none quite like the woman with raven hair and eyes that seemed to shift between green and gray depending on how the light caught them. Zara pushed open the door to the town's only hotel, the Silver Dollar, wincing as every head turned to stare at her. She was used to the stares by now. 3 towns in 2 years, and always the same ending whispers, accusations, and eventually someone asking her to leave. She straightened her spine, refusing to cower despite the exhaustion that made her bones ache. "I need a room," she said to the balding man behind the counter, her voice clear and steady despite her chattering teeth. "Just for a few nights until I can find more permanent lodgings." The man looked her up and down, taking in her travel-worn dress and the absence of luggage. $2 a night, paid in advance, he said, not unkindly. "Includes breakfast," Zara nodded, reaching for her hidden pouch. She counted out $6 3 nights would give her time to get her bearings and find work. As she slid the coins across the counter, she noticed a tall figure watching her from the corner of the room. He wasn't like the other men in the hotel. His clothes were dusty from the trail, but of good quality. A cattleman, not a miner, with a face weathered by sun and wind rather than coal dust. He wore his gun low on his hip, the mark of someone who knew how to use it but wasn't eager to do so. She looked away quickly. The last thing she needed was the attention of a man who might recognize her, or worse, try to help her. In her experience, help always came with a price and usually brought disaster in its wake. "Room 4, top of the stairs," the hotel keeper said, sliding a key across the counter. "Supper's at 6 if you want it." Zara thanked him and hurried up the stairs, feeling the stranger's eyes on her back. The room was small but clean, a bed with an iron frame, a washstand with a pitcher and basin, and a window that looked out overGunnison's Main Street. She sank onto the bed, allowing herself one moment of relief before facing the reality of her situation. She had enough money to last maybe 2 weeks if she was careful, and then she'd need work. A knock at the door startled her. She froze, wondering if trouble had found her already. "Miss." It was the hotel keeper. "There's hot water for washing up if you'd like, and the gentleman downstairs asked if you'd join him for supper. Said he'd pay for your meal." Zara's first instinct was to refuse. Strange men buying her meals had never led anywhere good. But her stomach growled traitorously at the thought of a hot meal she wouldn't have to pay for. "Tell him thank you," she said through the door, "but I prefer to dine alone." There was a pause. "He says his name is Hayes Callahan, madam. Says he might have work for you if you're looking." Work. That was different. She couldn't afford to turn down an opportunity, not when winter had settled in and jobs would be scarce. "I'll be down in 10 minutes, she relented. Hayes Callahan was seated at a corner table when she came downstairs, his broad shoulders filling out a clean flannel shirt. He stood when he saw her, revealing his full height at least 6 feet, maybe more. His hair was the color of wheat, his eyes a startling blue against his tanned skin. "Miss Sullivan," he said, surprising her. "Thank you for joining me." "How do you know my name?" she asked, immediately wary. "Small towns," he said with an apologetic smile. "News travels fast. I was at the counter when you checked in." She didn't believe him. She hadn't given her full name to the hotel keeper, but she sat down anyway, keeping her back to the wall so she could see the entire room. "Mr. Callahan," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "I understand you mentioned work. he nodded, waiting until the server had placed steaming plates of beef stew and fresh bread before them before speaking. "I have a ranch about 10 miles outside of town," he explained. "Circle C, it's called. I need someone to help with the house cooking, cleaning, that sort of thing. My last housekeeper left to get married last month, and I've been managing poorly on my own." "And why offer the position to me?" Zara asked, cautiously taking a bite of the stew. It was good, rich, and hearty. "A complete stranger who might rob you blind in the night." Hayes smiled, the expression transforming his face from merely handsome to something that made Zara's heart skip a beat despite herself. "You don't look like the robbing type," he said. "And I'm a decent judge of character. Besides, the job comes with room and board, separate from the main house. You'd have your privacy and I'd have hot meals again. Seems a fair arrangement." It did sound fair, too fair, in fact. Zara had learned long ago that when something seemed too good to be true, it usually was. But she needed the work, and a place outside of town might mean fewer prying eyes, fewer chances for her past to catch up with her. "I should warn you," she said slowly, looking down at her plate rather than at him, "that I don't tend to stay in one place very long, people say. They say I bring bad luck." She waited for the familiar response, the narrowed eyes, the sudden caution, perhaps even fear. Instead, Hayes Callahan laughed, a deep, warm sound that seemed to fill the entire room. "Miss Sullivan," he said, leaning forward slightly, his blue eyes fixed on hers, "I make my own luck, and I have a feeling that with you around, it might just be good luck for a change." Zara wanted to tell him he was a fool, that men who had said similar things were now dead or ruined, that wherever she went, disaster seemed to follow. But she needed this job, and Hayes Callahan, with his confident smile and steady gaze, didn't seem like a man who spooked easily. "Very well," she said finally. "I accept your offer, Mr. Callahan, but don't say I didn't warn you." "Hayes," he corrected. "If we're going to be working together, you might as well use my given name." "Hayes," she repeated, the name feeling strange on her tongue. "And you can call me Zara, I suppose." "Zara," he said, as if testing the sound of it. "It suits you. We'll leave first thing tomorrow if that's acceptable. The snow's holding off for now, but we might not be so lucky in a few days." She nodded, finishing her meal in silence. As they parted ways in the hotel lobby, Zara couldn't shake the feeling that she had just made either the best decision of her life or the worst. Only time would tell which it would be. True to his word, Hayes arrived at the hotel early the next morning with a wagon. Zara had little to pack, just a few dresses, a hairbrush, and the small leather-bound journal she'd kept since leaving home. She settled her bill with the hotel keeper, who seemed surprised she was leaving so soon. "Found work already?" he asked, eyeing Hayes through the window. "Yes," Zara replied simply, not offering further explanation. "Well, good luck to you," he said, handing back her change. "Callahan's a good man, keeps to himself mostly, but fair in his dealings." The journey to the Circle C ranch took most of the morning. Zara sat beside Hayes on the wagon bench, wrapped in a thick woolen blanket he had provided against the cold. They traveled through snow-covered valleys and forests of pine, the mountains always visible on the horizon. Hayes pointed out landmarks as they went: a rock formation shaped like a bear, the creek that ran through his property, a stand of aspens that turned gold in the fall. "It's beautiful country," Zara admitted, watching a hawk circle overhead. "That it is," Hayes agreed. "Been in my family for 2 generations now. My father came out from Boston in '49, thinking he'd strike it rich in the gold fields. Found this land instead and decided ranching was a more reliable way to make a living." "And was he right?" "Most years," Hayes said with a smile. "Cattle prices go up and down, but people always need beef. We do well enough." The we caught Zara's attention. "Do you have family at the ranch?" she asked, suddenly wondering if she'd misunderstood the arrangement. "Just me now," Hayes replied, his expression sobering. "My father passed 5 years ago. Mother went before him. I have a brother back east, lawyer in Chicago, but he has no interest in ranching." They crested a hill, and Zara got her first look at the Circle C. It was larger than she had expected, a sprawling main house built of sturdy logs, a large barn, several outbuildings and corrals where horses stomped and snorted in the cold air. A bunkhouse stood a little distance from the main house, smoke curling from its chimney. "How many hands do you employ?" she asked. "6 regular, more during roundup and branding," Hayes said. "Good men, all of them. Been with me for years, most of them. They stay in the bunkhouse." "Your quarters will be attached to the main house. There's a small bedroom and sitting room that my parents added for my grandmother when she lived with us. Has its own entrance, so you'll have privacy." The wagon rolled into the yard, and 2 men emerged from the barn to greet them. Hayes introduced them as Eduardo and Miguel, brothers who had been with the ranch since Hayes was a boy. They helped unload Zara's few belongings while Hayes showed her to her quarters. The rooms were small but comfortable, with a pot-bellied stove already lit and warming the space. A narrow bed with a colorful quilt, a rocking chair by the window, a small table with 2 chairs, and a washstand completed the furnishings. A door connected to the main house, but as Hayes had said, there was also a separate entrance. "Kitchen's through there," Hayes said, indicating the connecting door. "Pantry's stocked, but if there's anything special you need, just let me know when I go to town next week. Meals are usually at 6, noon, and 6, but I'm not particular as long as there's food on the table." He hesitated. "I hope you'll find it comfortable." "It's more than adequate," Zara assured him, touched by his concern. "Thank you." Hayes nodded, suddenly awkward. "Well, I'll leave you to get settled. Take the rest of the day to rest from the journey. You can start tomorrow." Left alone, Zara slowly unpacked her meager possessions, arranging them carefully in the small space. The room was clean and warm, the bed soft when she tested it. For the first time in months, she felt something like hope flutter in her chest. Perhaps here, miles from anywhere, her luck would change. Perhaps the disasters that had followed her wouldn't find her at the Circle C. It was a foolish thought, but she allowed herself to believe it, just for a moment. The next few days fell into a routine. Zara rose before dawn to prepare breakfast for Hayes and the ranch hands. The men ate in the main house's large kitchen, their conversation easy and good-natured. Hayes insisted that Zara join them rather than wait to eat alone, a custom that surprised her but seemed natural to the others. After breakfast, the men would head out to tend to the cattle, fix fences, or whatever other work needed doing. Zara would clean the kitchen, then tackle the rest of the house. It was large but not ostentatious, filled with solid, practical furnishings and the occasional touch that spoke of a woman's hand, Hayes's mother, she presumed. In the afternoons, she baked bread or prepared stews that could simmer slowly until supper time. The work was straightforward, the days peaceful. The men were respectful, treating her with a courteous distance that was neither overly familiar nor coldly formal. Hayes himself was often gone from sunup to sundown, returning tired but always taking time to thank her for the meal before retiring to his study to work on the ranch accounts. A week passed, then 2. Snow fell, covering the ranch in a pristine blanket of white. Zara found herself relaxing just a little. No one in Gunnison knew her history. No one at the ranch asked about her past. For the first time in years, she wasn't living with the constant fear of discovery, of whispers and accusations. It was almost Christmas when Hayes approached her with an invitation. "The town's holding its annual Christmas social on Saturday," he said over breakfast, the other men already having departed for their daily tasks. "Thought you might like to go. Get to know some of the local folks." Zara's hand stilled on the coffee pot. "I don't think that would be wise," she said carefully. "I'm not much for socializing." Hayes studied her face. "You've been here almost a month, Zara. Haven't gone into town once. It's not natural for a young woman to be so isolated." "I prefer it," she said, turning away to scrub at an already clean pot. "Besides, I wouldn't want to impose on your evening." "It wouldn't be an imposition," he said quietly. "I'd consider it a pleasure." The sincerity in his voice made her turn to look at him. Hayes was watching her with those clear blue eyes, a slight smile on his lips. In the weeks she'd been at the ranch, she'd come to appreciate his straightforward nature, his quiet strength. He never pushed, never pried, but she'd caught him looking at her sometimes when he thought she wouldn't notice, with a warmth that both frightened and thrilled her. "People talk," she said finally. "If I arrive with you, they'll assume." "Let them assume," Hayes shrugged. "I've never much cared for gossip." "You might care about this," Zara insisted, frustration creeping into her voice. "Hayes, I wasn't joking when I said I bring bad luck. Every town I've lived in, every family I've worked for, something always happens. A fire, a death, livestock dying mysteriously, crops failing, and people always blame me." "And are you to blame?" he asked calmly. "No," she exclaimed. "Of course not, I would never. But it doesn't matter. The bad things happen and I'm there, and so they must be my fault." Hayes stood, crossing the kitchen to stand before her. Gently, he took the rag from her hands and set it aside. "Zara Sullivan," he said, his voice low and serious, "I have never been the superstitious type. I don't believe in curses or bad luck. I believe in people making their own way in this world for good or ill. And I believe you are a woman who has been treated unfairly by life and by others." He was standing so close that Zara could feel the warmth radiating from him. She should step back, put distance between them, but she found herself frozen in place, captured by the intensity of his gaze. "Come to the social," he said softly. "Dance with me. Enjoy an evening away from work, and if the roof falls in or locusts descend upon us, I promise I won't blame you." Despite herself, Zara laughed. "You're a stubborn man, Hayes Callahan." "So I've been told," he agreed, smiling down at her. "Is that a yes?" She should say no. She should make up an excuse, a headache, too much work, anything. But the thought of an evening with Hayes, of music and dancing and pretending just for a little while that she was a normal young woman without a shadow hanging over her, was too tempting to resist. "Yes," she said, surprising herself. "But don't say I didn't warn you." The social was held in the town hall, a large wooden building that served as church, meeting place, and dance hall for Gunnison. By the time Hayes and Zara arrived, the room was already filled with people, miners and their wives, shopkeepers, ranchers from the surrounding area, all dressed in their Sunday best despite it being Saturday. Zara had spent hours preparing, washing her hair and pinning it up in a style she hadn't worn since leaving home. The dress she wore was her finest dark green wool with a touch of lace at the collar and cuffs, saved for special occasions that rarely came. Hayes had stopped short when she emerged from her room, his eyes widening slightly before he offered his arm with a gallant bow. Now, as they entered the hall, Zara felt eyes turning toward them. Hayes greeted people warmly, introducing her as Miss Sullivan, my housekeeper, but the speculative looks they received told her that people were already assuming more. "Ignore them," Hayes murmured, guiding her toward a table where punch was being served. "Small towns thrive on gossip. They'll find something else to talk about soon enough." The evening progressed more pleasantly than Zara had feared. Hayes introduced her to people he knew: the mercantile owner and his wife, the town doctor, neighboring ranchers. Most were polite if curious. A few of the women eyed her suspiciously, but Hayes stayed by her side, a steady presence that made it easier to bear the scrutiny. When the music began, a fiddle, an accordion, and a piano played by the schoolteacher, Hayes held out his hand. "May I have this dance, Miss Sullivan?" Zara hesitated only briefly before placing her hand in his. "I'm not sure I remember the steps," she admitted as he led her onto the floor. "It's been a long time." "Just follow my lead," Hayes said, placing his other hand lightly on her waist. "I won't let you stumble." The dance was a simple waltz, and Zara found that her body remembered the movements even if her mind was uncertain. Hayes was a surprisingly good dancer, guiding her smoothly around the floor. She was acutely aware of his hand on her waist, the clean scent of the soap he used, the way his eyes never left her face. "See," he said after a few minutes, "no disasters yet." As if his words had tempted fate, there was a sudden commotion at the entrance to the hall. Heads turned to see a group of men burst through the doors, their faces flushed with cold and alcohol. Zara recognized one of them immediately: Thomas Webb, the son of a rancher she had worked for in Wyoming. The ranch where the cattle had sickened and died mysteriously, where Mrs. Webb had fallen down the stairs and broken her neck, where Thomas himself had accused Zara of witchcraft and worse. "That's her," he shouted, pointing directly at Zara. "The witch, the one I told you about." The music screeched to a halt. Hayes's arm tightened around Zara's waist, steadying her as she swayed. "What's this about Webb?" he asked, his voice dangerously calm. Thomas staggered forward, clearly drunk. "Ask her," he spat. "Ask her what happened at my father's ranch. Ask her about my mother, God rest her soul. Ask her why our cattle started dying the day after she came to work for us." Murmurs swept through the crowd. Zara felt the familiar sensation of walls closing in, of air becoming too thin to breathe. "I need to go," she whispered to Hayes. "You're not going anywhere," Hayes replied, his eyes still on Thomas. "Webb, you're drunk. Whatever grievance you think you have, this isn't the place to air it." "You defending her, Callahan?" Thomas demanded. "You sleeping with her too? Better watch your back and check your herd. Everywhere she goes, death follows." "That's enough." The sheriff pushed through the crowd, his hand resting on the gun at his hip. "Webb, you and your friends need to clear out. You're disrupting a peaceful gathering." "Ask around about her," Thomas said, ignoring the sheriff and addressing the room at large. "Ask in Cheyenne. Ask in Laramie. They know her there. They know what she brings." The sheriff took Thomas by the arm. "Out. Now. Sleep it off, and if you want to file a complaint against the lady, you can do it sober and through proper channels." Thomas allowed himself to be led away, but not before pointing at Zara one last time. "Watch yourself, Callahan," he called over his shoulder. "She'll bring you nothing but ruin." The door closed behind them, leaving a stunned silence in their wake. Zara could feel every eye in the room on her, could see the suspicion blooming on faces that had been merely curious before. "Hayes," she said urgently, "I need to leave. Now." This time he didn't argue. With a firm hand on her elbow, he guided her through the crowd, nodding curtly to those who tried to speak to him. Outside, the cold air hit Zara like a slap, bringing her back to her senses. Hayes helped her into the wagon without a word, then climbed up beside her and set the horses in motion. They were halfway back to the ranch before he spoke. "Tell me." Zara stared straight ahead, her hands clenched in her lap. "Which part?" "The part where Mrs. Webb died in a fall that her son was convinced I caused. The part where the cattle developed some kind of sickness that no one could explain. Or the part where Thomas Webb came to my room one night, drunk, demanding things I wouldn't give, and then accused me of bewitching him when I fought him off. Hayes's hands tightened on the reins. He tried to force himself on you. He didn't succeed, Zara said flatly. But after that, the accusations started. Whispers at first, then open hostility. When his mother died, it was the final straw. I left before they could decide to do more than run me out of town. And the other places he mentioned, Zara sighed, suddenly exhausted. Similar stories. In Cheyenne, it was a fire that destroyed the home where I worked as a governess. Everyone survived, but the family was ruined. In Laramie, it was the bank. The owner hired me as a teller. 3 weeks later, the bank was robbed, the owner shot dead. People said I must have been working with the robbers. Were you? No, she exclaimed, turning to look at him for the first time since they'd left town. Hayes, I have never harmed anyone intentionally in my life. These things, they just happen, and I'm there. So it must be my fault, my curse, my bad luck that brings disaster wherever I go. Hayes was silent for a long moment, the only sound the creak of the wagon and the soft thud of hooves on snow. Do you believe it? He asked finally. Do you believe you're cursed? Zara looked away, watching the moonlight on the snow-covered landscape. I don't know any more, she admitted. I never used to, but after so many incidents, so many accusations, sometimes I wonder if they're right, if there is something about me that attracts tragedy. I don't believe it, Hayes said firmly. I believe you've had a run of terrible luck, and people looking for someone to blame found an easy target in a woman alone. You didn't see their faces tonight, Zara said bitterly. By tomorrow, half the town will be convinced I'm a witch or worse. It's only a matter of time before they come to the ranch, warning you against harboring me. And then something will happen, a cow will die, or a fire will start, or a storm will destroy the crops, and they'll point to me as the cause. Let them come, Hayes said, his jaw set stubbornly. This is my land and you're under my protection. No one's running you off, Zara, not while I have breath in my body. The fierceness of his declaration startled her. Why? She asked softly. Why would you risk your reputation, your standing in the community, for someone you barely know? Hayes guided the wagon into the ranch yard before answering. He set the brake and turned to face her, his expression serious in the moonlight. Because in the month you've been here, I've come to know you better than you think, he said. I've seen your kindness to Eduardo's youngest boy when he came by with a skinned knee. I've seen how you leave food out for the stray cat that lives in the barn, thinking no one notices. I've seen your strength and your dignity in the face of circumstances that would crush many people. And I've seen no evidence whatsoever of this bad luck you're supposed to bring. He reached out, taking her gloved hand in his. I told you when we met, Zara, I make my own luck, and I choose to make it with you. Zara stared at their joined hands, her heart pounding. She should pull away. She should pack her things tonight and be gone by morning, sparing Hayes the inevitable consequences of her presence. But the warmth of his hand, the conviction in his voice, made her want to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could be different this time. You're a fool, Hayes Callahan, she whispered. Perhaps, he agreed with a small smile, but I'm a stubborn fool, and I'm not easily scared off. Zara was halfway to the house when a distant howl made her pause. Wolves, she said, looking back at Hayes, who was securing the wagon. They rarely come close to the ranch, he assured her. Nothing to worry about, but something in the night air, some subtle shift in the silence that followed the howl, made the hair on the back of Zara's neck stand up. Hayes, she said slowly, you smell smoke. Hayes lifted his head, nostrils flaring. His expression changed instantly from reassurance to alarm. The barn, he said tersely, already moving. Get the men. Ring the bell. Zara ran to the post where the large iron bell hung, used to summon the hands in emergencies. She yanked on the rope. the clanging sound shattering the night's quiet. As she rang, she could see flames beginning to lick at the far side of the barn where the hay was stored. The bunkhouse door flew open, men spilling out in various states of undress. Hayes was already shouting orders, directing some to the well, others to get the horses out of the barn. Zara abandoned the bell and ran to help, her heart in her throat. The horses were panicking, rolling eyes reflecting the growing flames as the men tried to lead them from their stalls. "Get back!" Hayes shouted when he saw her in the doorway. "It's too dangerous." But Zara could see a horse still trapped in the far stall, rearing and whinnying in terror. Without thinking, she grabbed a bucket of water from one of the ranch hands, doused her skirts, and plunged into the smoke-filled barn. The heat was intense, the smoke choking. She pulled her shawl over her mouth and nose, ducking low as she made her way to the trapped horse. It was Thunder, Hayes's favorite gelding, a powerful black horse with a white star on his forehead. The flames hadn't reached his stall yet, but they were close, and the smoke was everywhere. "Easy, boy," Zara called, approaching slowly. "Easy now." The horse's eyes rolled wildly, but he recognized her voice. Zara had spent time with all the horses over the past month, bringing them treats, talking to them as she passed the corral. She reached out now, her hand steady despite her fear, and touched Thunder's neck. "That's it," she murmured. "We need to get out of here. You need to come with me." She unlatched the stall door, holding onto the horse's halter as she led him toward the exit. The smoke was thicker now, making it hard to see, hard to breathe. Zara's eyes stung, her lungs burned, but she kept moving, guiding the frightened animal toward the door and the fresh air beyond. They were almost there when a burning beam crashed down, missing them by inches. Thunder reared, nearly pulling free of her grasp. Zara held on, her voice hoarse but determined as she calmed him. They sidestepped the burning wood and stumbled out into the night air, where Hayes was waiting, his face a mask of fear and relief. "Are you out of your mind?" he demanded, taking Thunder's halter while Eduardo led Zara away from the barn. "You could have been killed." "The horse would have died," Zara said simply, coughing as she tried to clear her lungs of smoke. Hayes opened his mouth as if to argue further, then closed it, shaking his head as he led Thunder to the corral where the other horses had been secured. The men were still fighting the fire, forming a bucket brigade from the well to the barn, but it was clear they were fighting a losing battle. The flames had spread to the roof, lighting up the night sky with an ominous glow. By dawn, the barn was a smoldering ruin. The men, exhausted and smoke-stained, had managed to save all the animals and prevent the fire from spreading to other buildings, but the structure itself was beyond salvation. Hayes stood surveying the damage, his face grim but composed. Zara approached him cautiously, a pot of coffee in her hands. She had spent the night tending to the men, providing food and drink and bandaging minor burns. Now, as the first light of day revealed the full extent of the destruction, she felt the familiar weight of guilt settling on her shoulders. "See," she said quietly, handing Hayes a cup of the steaming coffee. "It's starting already, just like I warned you." Hayes looked at her over the rim of his cup, his blue eyes bloodshot but steady. "This wasn't your doing, Zara, wasn't it? The night after Thomas Webb appears and warns you against me, your barn burns down. That's quite a coincidence, don't you think?" "It's winter," Hayes pointed out reasonably. "Barns catch fire. A lantern gets knocked over, hay ignites. It happens." "It happens around me," Zara insisted, her voice rising slightly. "First the social is ruined, now this. Next it will be something worse. It always gets worse, Hayes." Hayes set his coffee cup down on a nearby fence post and took Zara by the shoulders, forcing her to look at him. "Listen to me," he said firmly. This fire was not caused by some mysterious curse. If anything, it was deliberately set. "What?" Zara gasped. "You think someone?" "I think Thomas Webb wasn't just passing through town," Hayes said grimly. "I think he followed you here with the specific intention of causing trouble, and I think it's entirely possible that he or one of his friends decided to teach me a lesson for defending you." Zara's mind reeled at the implication. "But that would be arson," Hayes finished for her. "A crime. Not supernatural bad luck, just a man with a grudge and a match." The idea was both terrifying and, strangely, liberating. If Hayes was right, if the fire had been deliberately set, then it wasn't her curse that had caused it. It was human malice, something tangible and explainable. "We need to tell the sheriff," she said. "Already sent Miguel to fetch him," Hayes confirmed. "But in the meantime, I want you to stay close to the house. If Webb is behind this, there's no telling what else he might try." The sheriff arrived mid-morning, listening gravely as Hayes explained his suspicions. He examined the ruins of the barn, paying particular attention to where the fire had started. "Could be arson," he admitted finally. "Hard to prove, but the way it started at the hay storage spread so quick. Someone could have tossed a lit match and been long gone before the flames were noticed." "Webb threatened us publicly last night," Hayes pointed out. "Dozens of witnesses heard him. Threatening someone and burning down their barn are two different things," the sheriff cautioned. "But I'll have a talk with Webb and his friends, see where they were last night. In the meantime, might be wise to keep a watch out. If it was arson, they might not be done." After the sheriff left, Hayes gathered the ranch hands. "Double watches tonight," he ordered. 2 men at all times, rotating shifts. Anyone sees or hears anything suspicious, fire a warning shot." The men nodded, their faces serious. They dispersed to get some rest before their watch duties, leaving Hayes and Zara alone by the ruins of the barn. "You should leave," Zara said suddenly. "Take the men and the cattle and go somewhere else until this blows over. It's me they want to hurt." Hayes looked at her incredulously. "Leave my home because some drunken fool has a vendetta? Not likely." "Hayes, please," Zara begged. "I couldn't bear it if something happened to you or any of the men because of me. If the barn fire was just the beginning." "Then we'll face whatever comes next," Hayes interrupted. "Together. I'm not abandoning you, Zara, and I'm certainly not running from my own property." The stubborn set of his jaw told her that arguing would be useless. Hayes Callahan was not a man who backed down easily, especially not when he believed he was right. And despite her fears, Zara couldn't help feeling a surge of warmth at his determination to protect her. "At least let me help with the watch tonight," she said. "I won't be able to sleep anyway." Hayes seemed about to refuse, then nodded reluctantly. "You can take the first shift with me, but you stay in the house, watching from the upstairs window. Better vantage point anyway." Night fell early, the darkness seeming more threatening than usual. Zara positioned herself at the upstairs window as instructed, a rifle that Hayes had insisted she take resting across the sill. She had protested that she didn't know how to shoot, but Hayes had spent a brief hour showing her the basics, enough that she could at least fire a warning if necessary. Hayes himself patrolled the grounds, his tall figure occasionally visible in the moonlight as he circled the buildings. Eduardo was stationed near what remained of the barn while the other men rested, ready to take over in a few hours. The night was quiet, almost eerily so. No wolves howled, no night birds called. Even the wind had died down, leaving a stillness that seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. Zara found herself straining to hear any sound, jumping at the occasional creak of the house settling. It was just after midnight when she saw a flicker of movement at the edge of the property, near the tree line. She squinted, trying to make out details in the darkness. There again. A shadow moving where no shadow should be, Zara raised the rifle, her heart pounding. She should fire the warning shot now, alert Hayes and the others. But what if it was just an animal? A deer, perhaps, or one of the ranch dogs returning from a hunt? She hesitated, watching the shadow. It moved again, more deliberately this time, and Zara saw the unmistakable silhouette of a man, hunched low, moving toward the house. Her hands shook as she aimed the rifle toward the sky, prepared to fire the warning shot. But before she could pull the trigger, a flash of fire erupted near the corrals where the horses had been temporarily penned. Flames leapt up, catching quickly on the wooden rails. Zara fired the rifle, the sound exploding in the quiet night. Almost immediately, she heard shouts from below as Hayes and the others responded to the alarm. She saw Hayes running toward the corrals, Eduardo and Miguel emerging from the bunkhouse, weapons drawn. In the chaos, Zara almost missed the second figure approaching the house from the opposite direction of the fire. The realization hit her like a physical blow. The fire was a distraction. Someone was using it to cover their approach to the house. To her. She turned the rifle toward the approaching figure, but she was too slow. A rock crashed through the window beside her, showering her with glass. Zara cried out, more in surprise than pain, ducking down below the window frame. She heard heavy footsteps on the porch, then the splintering of wood as someone forced the front door. Terror seized her. She was alone in the house, the men all rushing to save the horses from the corral fire. The intruder would reach her before help could arrive. Clutching the rifle, Zara moved to the top of the stairs, aiming down at the entryway below. The door burst open, and Thomas Webb staggered in, a pistol in one hand, a bottle in the other. His face, illuminated by the lamp Zara had left burning in the hallway, was twisted with hatred and drink. "Where are you, witch?" he slurred, waving the gun wildly. "Come out and face me." Zara's finger trembled on the trigger. She had never shot a person, never even contemplated it. But Thomas was dangerous, unhinged with alcohol and vengeance. If she didn't stop him, he might kill her, might turn his fury on Hayes when he returned. "Webb," she called, her voice stronger than she felt. "Put down the gun. The sheriff is on his way." Thomas looked up, his bloodshot eyes finding her at the top of the stairs. He laughed, an ugly sound that raised the hair on Zara's arms. "Liar," he spat. "Sheriff's 10 miles away. No one's coming to save you." He raised his pistol, aiming unsteadily at her. "My mother is dead because of you," he said, his words slurring. "My father's ranch is ruined. Now I'm going to end your curse for good." Zara closed her eyes and pulled the trigger. The rifle kicked against her shoulder, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. When she opened her eyes, Thomas was still standing, his expression one of shock. The bullet had missed him, embedding itself in the wall behind his head. Before she could reload, Thomas was moving, charging up the stairs toward her with surprising speed for a drunk man. Zara dropped the rifle and turned to run, but her skirts tangled around her legs, slowing her. She felt Thomas's hand grasp her arm, yanking her backward with brutal force. "Thought you could shoot me," he snarled, his face inches from hers, breath reeking of whiskey. "Thought you could use your witchcraft on me again." "I never used witchcraft on you or anyone," Zara gasped, struggling against his grip. "Your mother's death was an accident. The cattle sickness was natural. I had nothing to do with any of it." "Liar," Thomas shouted, raising the pistol to her temple. "You bewitched me. Made me want you when I should have hated you. Made me come to your room that night." "No," Zara said, forcing herself to meet his wild gaze steadily despite her terror. "You came to my room because you were drunk and thought I was an easy target. Just like you're drunk now, blaming me for your own failings and misfortunes." Thomas's face contorted with rage. His finger tightened on the trigger. Zara closed her eyes, certain her luck had finally run out. The shot that rang out didn't come from Thomas's pistol. It came from the doorway below where Hayes stood, his rifle smoking. Thomas jerked, his grip on Zara loosening as he staggered backward. Blood blossomed on his shoulder, spreading rapidly across his shirt. "Drop the gun, Webb," Hayes commanded, his voice like ice. "Next one goes through your heart." Thomas swayed, his face pale with shock and pain. The pistol slipped from his fingers, clattering down the stairs. He followed a moment later, collapsing in a heap on the landing. Hayes was up the stairs in seconds, kicking the pistol further away before turning to Zara. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, his hands gentle as they examined her for injuries. "No," Zara said, her voice shaking. "Just frightened, the glass, when he broke the window." Hayes pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly against his chest. Zara could feel his heart racing, matching the frantic pace of her own. "I thought I'd lost you," he murmured into her hair. "When I heard the shot, saw the broken window." "The corral?" Zara asked, suddenly remembering. "The horses?" "Safe," Hayes assured her. "Eduardo and the others got them out. The fire was contained quickly. It was just meant as a distraction, as you guessed." Thomas moaned from the landing, reminding them of his presence. Hayes released Zara reluctantly. "I need to tie him up before he recovers enough to cause more trouble." "The sheriff should be here by morning." Miguel rode to town to fetch him as soon as we realized what was happening. By the time the sheriff arrived, the sun was just rising. Thomas Webb had been patched up by the ranch cook, who had some medical knowledge, and secured in one of the storage rooms under guard. His accomplice, a drifter he had hired in town, had been caught trying to escape and was similarly detained. The sheriff took statements from everyone, his expression growing increasingly grim as the full story unfolded. "Attempted murder, arson, trespassing," he listed, shaking his head. "Webb's looking at a long stretch in prison if he doesn't hang." "He needs help more than hanging," Zara said quietly. "He's not well. His mother's death broke something in him." The sheriff regarded her with newfound respect. "That's mighty charitable, Miss Sullivan, considering he tried to kill you, but the law's the law. He'll stand trial for what he's done." After the sheriff left with the prisoners, an exhausted silence fell over the ranch. The men dispersed to catch some sleep before tackling the cleanup from the night's events. Hayes and Zara stood on the porch, watching the wagon carrying Thomas Webb disappear down the road. "You should rest," Hayes said, noticing the dark circles under Zara's eyes. "It's been a long night." "I'm not sure I can sleep," Zara admitted. "Every time I close my eyes, I see his face, the gun." Hayes took her hand, interlacing their fingers. "Then walk with me," he suggested. "The morning air might help clear your mind." They walked in companionable silence, following a path that led away from the buildings and toward a small rise overlooking the property. The snow crunched beneath their boots, the air crisp and clean. When they reached the top of the rise, Hayes stopped, turning to face her. "I had something I wanted to ask you," he said, suddenly seeming nervous. "Before all this happened, before the social even." Zara looked at him curiously. "What is it?" Hayes ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she had come to recognize as a sign of his discomfort. "This isn't exactly how I planned it," he said with a rueful smile. "I was going to wait for the right moment, somewhere more romantic than a snow-covered hill after a night of violence." Understanding dawned on Zara, bringing with it a mixture of joy and trepidation. "Hayes, let me finish," he said quickly. "Zara Sullivan, in the short time you've been here, you've become essential to me. Not just as my housekeeper, but as the woman who brings light into my home, who challenges me, who faces life's hardships with a courage that humbles me. I find myself thinking about you when we're apart, counting the hours until I can see you again." He took both her hands in his blue eyes earnest. "I know it's fast. I know you have reservations about your supposed bad luck, but I meant what I said. I make my own luck, and I want to make it with you for the rest of our lives. Are you asking me to marry you?" Zara whispered, hardly daring to believe it. "I am," Hayes confirmed. "Not because you need protection or because I need a housekeeper, but because I've fallen in love with you, Zara Sullivan, and I hope that you might feel something for me too." Zara's heart felt too large for her chest, expanding with a joy she had never expected to experience. But fear lingered, a shadow on her happiness. "What about the things that have happened? The social, the barn, Thomas? What about them?" Hayes asked. "The social was disrupted by a man with a grudge. The barn was burned by an arsonist. Thomas Webb is a disturbed individual who fixated on you as the cause of his troubles. None of that is supernatural bad luck, Zara. It's just life, sometimes cruel, sometimes challenging, but navigable if we face it together." He touched her cheek gently. "I'm not afraid of what might come as long as you're by my side. The question is, are you brave enough to believe in us, to trust that what we build together is stronger than any supposed curse?" Zara closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. For years, she had lived in fear, always waiting for the next disaster, always blaming herself for circumstances beyond her control. Hayes offered her not just love, but freedom from that fear, a chance to believe in herself and in a future unclouded by superstition. "Yes," she said, opening her eyes to meet his gaze. "Yes, I'll marry you, Hayes Callahan. And yes, I'm brave enough to believe that our luck together will be good." The smile that broke across Hayes's face was like the sunrise, warm and full of promise. He pulled her into his arms, lifting her off her feet in his enthusiasm. When he set her down, his expression grew serious again. "I should warn you," he said, his eyes twinkling, "that I'm a stubborn man who sometimes works too hard and forgets to come in for supper. I snore when I'm tired, and I'm terrible at remembering birthdays." Zara laughed, a sound of pure happiness. "And I should warn you that I'm a woman who worries too much, burns biscuits when I'm distracted, and has an irrational fear of thunderstorms." "Then we're perfectly matched," Hayes declared, bending to kiss her. His lips were warm against hers, the kiss gentle at first, then deepening as Zara responded. She wound her arms around his neck, feeling for the first time in years that she was exactly where she belonged. They were married in the spring, after the snow had melted and the land had turned green again. The ceremony was small, just the ranch hands, a few neighbors who had come to know and respect Zara in the months since the incident with Thomas Webb, and the preacher from town. Zara wore a simple white dress she had sewn herself, with wildflowers in her hair instead of a veil. Hayes had rebuilt the barn by then, the ranch hands and neighbors coming together to raise the new structure in a fraction of the time it would have taken him alone. Thomas Webb had been sentenced to 15 years in prison for his crimes, a fact that brought Zara more relief than vindication. As they spoke their vows under the clear Colorado sky, Zara felt the last of her fear slipping away. The future stretched before them, full of possibilities, children, perhaps, to fill the big house with laughter. Seasons of work and rest on the land that Hayes loved. Years of building a life together, one day at a time. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the preacher declared, and cheers erupted from the small gathering. Hayes kissed her, his hands gentle on her waist. "Mrs. Callahan," he murmured against her lips, "how does it feel to start making our luck together officially?" Zara smiled up at him, her heart full. "Like the luckiest thing that's ever happened to me," she replied. And as they turned to face their friends and their future, Zara knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Not as a cursed woman and the man who defied superstition to love her, but as partners, equals in creating their own fortune, their own happiness, their own luck. 5 years later, the Circle C Ranch had prospered beyond even Hayes's optimistic expectations. The cattle herds had grown. The ranch had expanded to include neighboring properties when they came up for sale, and the main house had been enlarged to accommodate the growing Callahan family. Zara stood on the porch, watching as Hayes led their 3-year-old son, Henry, on his first pony ride around the yard. The boy's delighted laughter floated on the summer air, matched by his father's deeper chuckles. Their daughter, 1-year-old Clara, slept peacefully in Zara's arms, her chubby face flushed with the afternoon warmth. In the years since their marriage, there had been challenges: a harsh winter that threatened the herd, a dispute over water rights with a new neighbor, a fever that had swept through the ranch, touching every family. But there had been no mysterious disasters, no unexplained calamities, no whispers of curses or bad luck. Zara had come to understand that what she had experienced before meeting Hayes wasn't supernatural misfortune, but the ordinary trials of life, magnified by isolation and the human tendency to seek scapegoats for suffering. With Hayes by her side, supporting her, believing in her, she had found the strength to face adversity without blaming herself. As the sun began to set, painting the mountains with gold and purple, Hayes lifted Henry from the pony and carried him toward the house, the boy chattering excitedly about his adventure. Hayes's face, now bearing a few more lines around the eyes from years of squinting in the sun, lit up when he saw Zara waiting. "How are my girls?" he asked, climbing the porch steps to kiss Zara's forehead, then bending to brush his lips against his daughter's soft hair. "We're perfect," Zara replied, leaning against his side as they watched the last rays of sunlight fade from the valley. Just perfect, and they were. Not because life had become magically free of difficulties, but because they faced whatever came together, making their own luck day by day, choice by choice, love by love.